And we are recording. All right. We are all set. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 31st Paparelli Zoom chat for entrepreneurs. Thanks for coming. We're all about entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. At the last chat, last week, we actually had our discussion was around breaking through. It's talking about breaking through the market. And we had Louise Wazalewski, who is a good friend and a great entrepreneur. And she's selling into state governments, which is tough to break through. But what I learned is a big part of breaking through in complex organizations like that are very well siloed is just follow the money in the prospect organization, and that'll help you break through. There are many other insights that came from the conversation and with Louise. And, so I asked you to subscribe to the YouTube channel at zoom.paparelli.com, zoom.paparelli.com. Then you can view and share the chat, and also the summaries can be found of all of these on paparelli.com. So I look forward to you helping me sort of get the word out here, which would be great. We have a new person here, a friend that's coming from North Carolina. It's a new entrepreneur looking for some insights. Every week, great ideas and insights are shared on this Zoom chat from other entrepreneurs. That's why we need each other to be here. Together we are stronger. And ask John Marshall to talk about the chat feature during this Zoom call. John?
Hey, thank you, Charlie. Hi, I'm John Marshall, and a privilege to help Charlie. As Charlie does his interview, if any of you all have questions me on the send me a chat, and if it's pertaining to what we're talking to at that time, I will interrupt Charlie and ask the question. If not, I'll send you a little note and ask you if you would kindly hold your question and ask it in person at our Q&A period, which will start exactly at 9:45. Thank you very much.
All right, John. Well, thanks for the help. I appreciate you being here. And I always have the entrepreneur's thought of the day straight from the Bible. And it is Matthew 25:40. And the King, God, will reply during Judgment Day, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And my application for this, I think it's appropriate here for our Zoom call with our guest, is God's call in our lives is to see and help the poor. It's not, we're not to be lovers of money, but we're supposed to be lovers of people. That's how we've been built. Every week at Thursday from 12 to 1, I lead a Bible study via Zoom. If you're interested in attending, simply just send me your email and I'll put you on the list. So let's get started. I got a call from a friend of mine, Mike Morris, whose birthday, by the way, was last Monday. He's a former board member of the Technology Association of Georgia. He's also VP and regional manager for a large publicly held consulting firm. He's a supporter of this Zoom chat for entrepreneurs. And he told me about a young man who won a startup competition, that was hosted by the Technology Association of Georgia. And he said the guy's still he was still a teenager when he was presenting to our panel, and we were all blown away. Well, I've never interviewed an entrepreneur who started a nonprofit, one. And furthermore, I've never interviewed an entrepreneur who started a company at 16. So I was kind of skeptical, to kind of say the least, I'll tell you that. But Mike was so excited about this young man that I said, all right, I trust your judgment, Mike, I'll give him a call. So I set a call with Jack Griffin, who's the founder and CEO of foodfinder.us. foodfinder.us. When we finally connected, I'll tell you, I was blown away by this young man. Jack's transparency and singular focus and his ever-expanding vision really impressed me. It also inspired me. What really hooked me was how he moved the nonprofit he founded from a very high impact, social impact, helping so many thousands and thousands of people. He moved it to sustainability. Now, I've worked with a lot of nonprofits in my profession, in my lifetime, really. And I've never seen anybody who accomplished what Jack's accomplished. So I was really excited to do this interview with Jack, and because I think he's got some great stories to tell us, and he's got some great experience. So it is a great story. It's loaded with startup lessons. You're going to see that. Jack, welcome to the Paparelli Zoom Chat for Entrepreneurs. Thanks for taking the time to give back to our community of entrepreneurs. Please unmute yourself.
Of course. Hey there. No, thank you so much for having me, and really happy to be here.
Wow. You're a good man to take the time out of your busy schedule. You got a lot of people pulling on you. So I wondered if we could start, since it's so unusual that you started this at 16, I wonder if we can go back before 16, okay? And tell us who you were before you started foodfinder.us.
Yeah, of course. So when I was growing up right here in the Metro Atlanta area, here in Gwinnett County, I was pretty normal, by all traditional definitions. I was lucky enough to have two loving parents who always instilled in me their values, prioritizing being kind to others. But of course, for me as a teenager, and especially in today's competitive educational world, I was in high school, getting ready for, just focusing on trying to get good grades, making friends and things like that. So it was pretty much, just trying to do, be a good person and do the best I could with my studies, but nothing much beyond that.
Okay. So then tell us where this idea comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that really shifted in terms of at least what I understood to be, what's important in life. It all really shifted when I was 15 years old. I was a sophomore in high school back in 2013. And one night, like all the cool kids, I was watching 60 Minutes before school on Sunday. And I was watching this story at the time that was called Hard Times Generation. And this was really shining a light on how, given it was 2013, we were coming out of the Great Recession at that point, and even though the economy was improving, the people who were being left behind in that recovery were the hardest hit to begin with. So this story was profiling the lives of homeless children, families, and students that were truly hungry and food insecure, who only could afford canned food but had no way to heat it up, who were living out of trucks, kids who were literally my age in the story, who were even, again, brave enough to share their circumstances with the world.
Said, you've watched a lot of 60 Minutes, though, and
yeah,
right. And so why did this particular segment, it grabbed you to the point where it changed your life? So why was that? Because you don't have this. That's why I started early, because I don't see that you have a history of, mission trips and helping, even being involved in nonprofits. It was like, boom, it just changed. So
yeah, that's exactly right. I didn't do really any volunteering or activism to that point, but this story was so compelling to me because, again, it was children who were literally my age, who could have easily just been my classmates if I lived where they were in Florida, but I was here in Georgia. And a big premise of the children who were sharing their stories was talking about how they just want to be normal kids, of how not only is the problem so severe of, the struggles of economic impoverishment that face so many families and children in America, it's the fact that there's also the shame and stigma on poverty in America. So really what I started to, after watching this news story, I began thinking, well, how many kids like that are my classmates, are who go to school with me? But, all I see when I walk down the hall are my friends, my peers, my colleagues. But even, in a big public school
so what did you see when you went to school? How did you, now you have new eyes, right? Mm-hmm. That's what's pretty interesting. So that one segment gave you new eyes to see the people that were in need. So what did you see?
That's exactly right. It shifted my lens with which I viewed, the people in my world. So of course, when I walked down the hall, I still saw the same people, the same children and, my friends and, fellow high schoolers or teenagers at that point. But I just started thinking of, how invisible this problem really is that just because you can't see it, but just by looking at someone doesn't mean that, I think this is true for everyone, is that, we all have our own struggles. And it's not, sometimes we don't always want them to be apparent.
How did these people then start to stand out for you in school?
Yeah, I wanted to learn more because I realized that, once I started seeing how big this problem really was, and I wasn't sure, that's why I can't really go ask someone and didn't want to invade someone's privacy. So I thought that maybe to get a better sense of what that need for hunger and assistance was like for my school, just out of curiosity's sake, I wanted to speak to my teachers and my administrators at the school, the people who would know how many students were actually on free and reduced lunch and who were facing these hard circumstances.
What kind of lunch?
Free and reduced lunch. So, the federal
quickly. Free and reduced lunch is the program. Okay. So you went to where'd you go to, a counselor?
Yeah, counselor and my assistant principal.
Okay. And what'd you learn?
I learned that out of, because I was at Peachtree Ridge High School at the time, 3,000 students at the school out of 4 grades. And she told me that, oh yeah, we have 1,000 students on free and reduced lunch who need help, even paying for lunch every single day. And she said, of course, she didn't skip a beat. Not only was 1/3 of the school receiving this assistance, we were by far one of the lowest participation rates. And there were easily schools, even, 5 or 10 miles away, that had 90+% student enrollment on federal food assistance programs.
What did you do? How did that wash over you?
It blew my mind. It was mind-boggling, and it was just, you would never guess unless you
Now you're sitting in class and you're looking and saying 1/3 of this class is on free or reduced lunch programs. Wow.
Yeah, it was really disheartening just to know that it was that the need was even. And that's something, of course, I know now with my 7 years of working on Food Finder, is that the need is everywhere, is that hunger is not limited to any demographic.
So we see this big problem, and you sit there and I'm little Jack at 16 years old in high school, and look, 1/3 of my class is on this program. They're in need they're on the free and reduced lunch. So what does Jack do? Most people go, that's a problem. And then they go back to their friends, right? Like, what does Jack do? What did you do?
Yeah, I really couldn't sit still anymore now that my ignorance had been shattered as to, now that I know this is a problem, even though I had to
unlearn, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm thankful that I did know, and that my ignorance was, sort of demolished. So I realized that even though I didn't, there wasn't really any specific avenue that I could work with within, schools in particular. I realized that there were all these programs like the one in that news story there were food pantries and shelters that were offering assistance to, the kids that I went to school with and the families who were struggling in my community. So I wanted to find a place like that where I could volunteer at or donate to.
Okay, good. Because that makes sense, because you're saying there's already people solving this problem, right? So if I'm compelled to help, I'll join them.
Yep.
So you did.
Yeah. So I was like,
why didn't it end there? What happened?
Yeah. And that's where really we're getting on the impetus behind Food Finder itself. And I just went to the first place I thought of to search, because I didn't know off the top of my head where to volunteer. So I went straight to Google. I was like,
you don't even have a driver's license. Do you have a driver's license at that time?
At that time, 2013, no. Could not drive myself.
So you don't even have wheels, all right?
Yeah, I think I had a permit, but no car of my own, no license. But it's like, all right, where can I go close by? And I just tried to find, just generic search terms, because of course I didn't know the name of specific locations. So I couldn't type that into the search bar. So I was like, all right, places to volunteer near me, food pantries near me. And that's where I realized that search was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. It was, as it turns out, Google is a lot better at pointing you to restaurants than it is to food pantries and social service programs. And of course, that's a really
like
big
I said
problem.
when I opened this, follow the money, right?
Exactly.
Really
so just for really local places. And of course, we talked about this in our pre-interview of, food pantries being, of course, such vital assistance programs in our communities. They have very small digital footprints, very small budgets to invest into digital marketing and SEO. But it's just, they're so needed. And of course it was.
So what did you do then? So you have this problem. All you're trying to do is find one that you can go to and help,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened?
And of course, could just stop there. It was like, found a place eventually. So it wasn't the end of the world, but really it was sort of the beginning of the end for where the whole new journey for me with Food Finder opened up was when I asked myself, if I was having this much trouble and spending this much time and energy trying to find a place to volunteer at, what if I was someone who needed the food relief being offered at these programs? Why was it so difficult? Really the same one-to-one, the same search terms I would use to try to find a place to volunteer at. For if I was one of those students on free and reduced lunch who wasn't sure how I would eat over the weekend or over holiday breaks or over the summer.
This is, from an entrepreneur standpoint, this is a very important piece that you have here. So you sit there and you say, I see this really big problem, societal problem. But if you're going to start a company, you have to come down to say, well, what problem within this huge sort of problem, right? Social need is not being addressed. And you came right down to it, said, because of a personal experience, I can't even find a place to volunteer. How am I going to find a place if I really needed food? How would I find that? And so you nailed the problem right from the start, which is pretty amazing. It's almost miraculous, okay, in that regard, okay? But that's good because you didn't come with any prejudice into this market.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
And that's exactly right. Because
so
again,
where do you go? So now you say, well, oh yeah, so I can, I need to answer this question. How can I make it easier for people to find food?
Yeah, and I thought, again, I identified what I thought to be a problem. And of course, it was a problem that I experienced. But as we all know, that just because I experienced it doesn't mean that other people are, and that there would be enough of a problem to warrant starting an organization of any type.
That's genius.
So, but again, once that I knew that I thought I had the hypothesis of, I think this is enough of a problem to warrant creating a new solution. Then I started just doing discovery work. I wanted to learn more because fortunately I didn't have any preconceived notions or biases that would sort of skew of like the best way to go about this. But all I had known is that for this online search was really difficult. So I needed to learn more first about how did food insecure families or people seeking social services in America, how did they eventually end up getting connected to the programs in their community that could help them?
So what did you do?
I had more interviews. Didn't know it was called, customer discovery or user discovery at the time, but that's where I had, I just wanted to learn more. And I knew that I knew nothing about this space.
Who did you interview at this point?
I spoke more with, people at my school, the counselors who were, I ended up with, it was the same assistant principal who told me about how many were on free and reduced lunch. She said, oh, you should really talk to the counselors at our school because they're the ones who oftentimes, they're not just giving out college advice. They're the ones who know and who spend a lot of time with the students who are food insecure and who they know need help with food and other just basic necessities outside of school.
So the students are going to these people to find out where they can go to find this food.
Exactly.
Right? And so what did you find out?
I spoke with, a whole host of the counselors just in my school, and they had stories on stories of how they had really an unparalleled vantage point as to they knew exactly which students were really struggling economically outside of school. They said, yeah, we have these whole binders full of names of food pantries and shelters and really emergency services. But of course, they can't take the binders with them. They were like, yeah, we know these are really outdated. And they were saying that even without having to pry too deep, they were volunteering their struggles and the problems that they knew were already existing in how they did their small part to try.
So what do you take away from that? So you saw the binders, you see printed lists, they say they're outdated, so you go like, okay, so now what?
Yeah, and this is where it really started to combine that, firsthand learning of seeing how they really have, it's a very analog, very printed, again.
Yeah, but this is I had somebody on this call mention my former partner who's a sales guy. His name was Bob Lasher, and I used to say, well, what's the trick when you make a call on somebody? He goes, well, he says, I never really understood the technology solutions that we sold, so I would always ask them, how do they do it now? And that's what you did. You said, well, how do they do it now? And they held up a binder, and you went, oh, that's even worse than me, doing Google here.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where it was just the problems on both ends. Me as a potential seeker of this information online by trying to find where these food pantries are in my area, and combined with how the advocates for hungry kids, like counselors, are using very outdated methods to try and connect them to these same programs. Then I realized that there's a better way to do this, and that's where the idea of a technology solution, just a website that would be able to be regularly updated with a current and relevant database of, even if it's just for Gwinnett County, Georgia, a digital solution that
that's
would
where you
through
started, right?
Yeah,
you said, well, maybe just help my community. So I know that once you've done this for so long, you start talking like you were thinking, globally here. Okay. But the fact of the matter is you really started probably just saying Gwinnett County.
Yeah. And even
so what kind of problem was that, just to kind of gather that information?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point, because I had no intention of being even an entrepreneur, of not even starting an organization. It probably took me about 3 years after Food Finder was already in existence, serving folks in need, where I started considering myself an entrepreneur, and then started going to national, global scale and all like that. But
That's fantastic.
I wanted to help folks in my backyard, just do something small but meaningful to help out. And then to your question, it was extraordinarily difficult even to compile a couple dozen food pantries in a database for, Gwinnett County, even within a 15, 20-mile radius of my house. It took a month to use, because we had to brute force it with the...
No, you said we. Who's we?
My parents and I employed
really?
I employed the help of my my true day one supporters of, they were pretty hands off, but were always supportive of me in this journey. I was like, well, this is a great project.
That's what good parents do. Say, man, this is great. We love you. Go ahead and do it. Right.
Yeah. Free labor,
love you, Jack.
Emotional support. So I was saying, like, this is a problem that I want to help out and solve, but this was so difficult because we had to use the same methods and means that were failing food insecure families already. And we just had to use every search term we could think of, and any of these lists.
So you actually recruited them at that point.
Yeah, I was
went from stand back, we love our son, isn't it wonderful what he's doing, to no, you don't understand. I need you to get on the phone.
Yeah, I was like, please help. Just really spend time. We all sat down at the kitchen table together with all three of our computers. We had one spreadsheet of, if you have a new name, we have these names of food pantries that we think are operational, but we need to confirm that they're still up and running. It was a whole thing.
So were you making phone calls, or were you just doing searches?
Both.
Okay.
And this is, it helped inform Food Finder's data verification on a national scale. We've gotten a lot better at it since then, but in our ignorance as to...
But you just sat there, you did searches, you made calls, and you just started compiling a list. Just for Gwinnett County.
Yep. And it took a month for about 40.
So
40,
you're
50
first, you're the only person I ever met, the only entrepreneur I ever met that has their first employees were their parents. Okay.
Right. Yep. True saints.
So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
that's the most cost-effective employee base that you could ever recruit. I think that's really incredible what you've done there. All right. So then what? So how many, so at the end of the month, how many calls did you make, and how many food pantries did you wind up with?
Yeah. I can't remember exactly how many calls we made or how many searches we did, but we ended up with about 50, 40, the thing was about 48 after a month of using all these searches. So you're spending a couple hours, still, because still had school, they had, jobs, still a couple hours a day only translating to about 1.5 food pantries that we could confirm that were in existence per day. Like that's not great. That's not scalable, at least at that stage, but we had what we needed. And of course we weren't thinking national or statewide at that point. So we had what we need. We had the most current, relevant, up-to-date list of food pantries that we could then put into a database. And then of course there were no,
okay. So you did that.
Yeah. We had to build a website.
And so now you're done.
Yeah, we had to build a website to actually make it available. So we found help. We hired a local team here in Atlanta. Well, of course, we needed money, and of course, we're not thinking yet of the statewide or expansion. We were like, all right, we need to make this available. I don't know the first thing about websites or code. I've never written a line of code in my life and never planned to, but we found some great engineers to help us out at a discounted rate. This is about
Who came up with the money?
Yeah, this is about the spring of 2014 now. And I was like,
who came up? Where'd the money come from?
Friends and family round. So we launched
a round, right? There's no
friends
round.
and family.
This is, you just asked them to contribute money to get this done.
Yeah, so we launched a crowdfunding campaign. It was like, we need money, we don't have it. So we launched an Indiegogo campaign to crowdfund from friends, family, and strangers alike who wanted to, who shared all this. We shared our story. We shared what something like Food Finder was needed. And we asked for people to donate. And this was even before we were a nonprofit, but we were asking for donations.
So now you have something. So now you've gotten your parents bought in, and now you're kind of going to family members and friends, and now you're going beyond that.
Exactly. Yeah, we had strangers who even just
so you're evangelizing at this point.
Yeah, made a video of it's like, oh God, I think I still have that video somewhere of me, in like a hoodie and like my high school self asking, saying, here's what I've learned, here's what we're trying to do, and why we're trying to help these people this specific way. And in about a month-long campaign, we raised $6,000 out of a $5,000 goal through strangers, friends, and family alike. So that was what we had.
And that built the website?
That built a month later. Food Finder was operational for a website serving folks in the surrounding Gwinnett County area.
That's foodfinder.us.
Yeah, that was correct. It wasn't even, that's our nationwide URL now. That's, of course, the correct one, but it was foodfinderga.org.
Okay.
Because it was still for Georgia. I don't think foodfinder.us was available at that point.
So how do you go from doing this in Gwinnett County to then say, but there's more, right? I mean, I'm sure your parents, I don't know where your parents were, it would have been like, isn't this enough? Jack, you need to go to college at some point and all this, you're getting consumed by this. You need to step back. Did they give you any of that advice?
They were always encouraging. But of course they knew that, like, you should probably focus on like the SAT and grades and college. So they're always supportive, but they really gave me that, they gave me a lot of freedom to spend my time where I wanted. If it was between, trying to balance my studies with Food Finder, because of course Food Finder's
but this thing is becoming more and more of your identity.
That's exactly right. So it was the combination of the fact that Food Finder was, once it was live in, halfway through 2014, it was received so well. And we, even for the first 6 months that it was in operation, we connected nearly 4,000 families through the.
This is just in Gwinnett County.
Yeah, we connected 4,000 families to food assistance providers. So it was received
so well.
You were
onto something.
Yeah, we might be onto something. And then we go back even to the sort of the lesson we learned from the original news story that I watched that started all this, is that the fact that hunger is not limited to Gwinnett County, Georgia. And in fact, there are plenty of areas even within Georgia in our home state where the need is even higher. So it's like, all right, let's see if we can expand this a bit. And that was really the start.
Because now your bank balance is down to zero again. And now you're going to expand it a bit. Mm-hmm. And your parents are tapped out.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So then you go, how do you get out of Gwinnett County, go to the other counties? Did you do one county at a time, or what happened?
Yeah, we had to find a new way. Unsurprisingly, we couldn't do what we did for Gwinnett for all 150, 160 counties in Georgia. We had to find a new way to scale up our procedures to more efficiently get this accurate information on food assistance programs in a way that would still be relevant to the people we're trying to serve. So Fortunately, we didn't have to change much of the infrastructure of Food Finder, so not a lot of money would be needed to we didn't have to overhaul the website. But in the back end of the database, we had to really shift things up.
So get me to what you did to go beyond sitting around a kitchen table, you and your parents trying to, bang this thing out and build a database. What did you do next to leverage?
So instead of brute forcing it, because that would never be feasible, sort of follow the money. That's a good way of thinking about it. I had to learn more about really what the fight against hunger looks like in America. So where is there this centralization of authority, of resources, in the social service landscape, not only in Georgia, but in America? And in doing that research of trying to find, is there anyone who knows, like on a large scale, like all of the food pantries for a county or for a metro area like Atlanta? And that's where I sort of realized, I understood that actually there are, about 1,000 food pantries in Georgia, give or take, but it's actually a bit of a pretty simple hierarchical supply chain in the fact that there are only 6 or 7 major food banks in America that are actually the distributors of food assistance that supply the food that ends up at all those 1,000 really small local food providers on the ground.
So you understand the distribution channel. So you got these master distributors, and they're called food banks.
Yeah, so food banks, right here, we have the Atlanta Community Food Bank downtown. That's a huge, of course, they're a wonderful operation.
So what did you do? So you discover this.
And I hit all those food banks up.
Did you go to Bill Bowling down at the food bank?
I did. I met with Bill Bowling in person as he was still the head down there. He was right before his retirement. And I was telling him about going statewide, and he knew it was like, he was encouraging, but he was like, he knew it would be extremely difficult to pull off.
What did he tell you?
He said, "Good luck with that, son." And of course he wasn't malicious with it at all. This is
the founder of the food bank, the first food bank, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. It's pretty.
But incredible. He knew better than anyone the challenges of trying to scale something like Food Finder up to an entire state, because that's why there's not even one food bank for a state. That needs multiple. Right. And of course, they each supply hundreds of food providers on the ground. So, but I knew that the food bank level would be the key to sharing when they would share their list of partner agencies with us. Since they're their suppliers, the food banks are in the best position to have the best information on the food pantries that they provide food to. So it took a lot of still elbow grease in the sense that we had to be very persistent in our outreach and saying we're all trying to help the same people. We want to, as Food Finder, drive traffic to the food provider agencies that you supply to. So, that's, trying to say why it is in their best interest for us we want to help on the demand side. How long
did it take for them to release the list to you?
A lot of tries. It was still, we can't fault anyone.
How long time did it take?
A year and a half.
A year and a half of you continuing to bang on these guys for them to finally say, yeah, well, okay, here, you can have our list.
It was a long time. And that's where it sort of gotten to the fact of, and you can't fault any individual for this, but, still people are very protective of their information.
Yeah, right.
Not really warranted in the sense that, again, we're trying to help the same people. Like, I'm literally trying to help drive traffic to the people.
It's almost like they're trying to they want to make sure that they get the credit.
Yeah, so there are a lot of whole things that we can or cannot get into. Probably not in the time we have left.
Nonprofits are interesting in that regard. They're siloed in a lot of cases.
Yeah, interesting is a word that we can use. But nonprofits are fragmented.
So how long did it take you to get? So you get this list from these people. Mm-hmm. Then how long was it from that you then covered the state of Georgia?
Yeah, so it really wasn't long at all. So the year and a half of, from May of 2014 to about December of 2015 was all about the data. Once we had the data, that was the hard part. We just uploaded it. We had the resources in the back end we could upload an entire spreadsheet as long as it's in the right format. We could just upload the spreadsheet, and all of a sudden, a minute later, those new pins on our assistance map of food providers would be live and would then help other people who would use food.
Yeah, but how do you prevent? Databases are a wonderful thing, but they're very expensive to maintain.
Yep.
Just like you said, they had binders at the counselor's office at your school that were immediately outdated as soon as they were printed.
Yep.
What was your plan to say, I've got to maintain this thing to be accurate?
Yeah, so in 2014, we filed for official 501c3 registration. So we were an official nonprofit in the state of Georgia, which is great. So we were still, here in really no, we weren't. I wasn't doing it. I didn't have the wherewithal or the know-how at that point to run a official donation campaign. But we were still accepting donations here and there. I think only in 2015 though we only got a couple $1,000s, so still not even as much as our initial crowdfunding campaign. But as you said, when the need and the costs were increasing, that's when we had to switch our funding, our funding model. We didn't have any funding model, but we started exploring, well, what about grants? Now that we were a 501c3, what foundations and grant-making institutions could we turn to here in Atlanta or even across the country that would help support our operations?
Who came up with that idea? Because you're so young, you didn't know anything about grants. You didn't know about foundations.
Yeah, I was... Yeah, didn't really know, didn't even know the first place to turn in that sense, but I sort of learned sort of just by doing, in the sense that the food pantries and the food banks that we were working with, they had, grant makers.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so it was like, well, if these funders are supporting these food providers on the ground, and they obviously care about the fight against hunger, well, what about us? Because we could, again, be really sort of a virtuous cycle of we could help support and really even make their philanthropic dollars go even further.
And we're kind of coming short on time, so I want to make sure that I kind of move this thing a little bit. I'm going to kind of jump ahead a bit. Now, Jack gets out of high school, and does he just keep doing this, or does he go to college?
Go to college.
Where'd you go?
University of Michigan from 2015 to 2019.
And so how do you go to college, University of Michigan, at the same time keep this show on the road?
Good question. I'll let you know when I figure that out. Because it was really, again, those are two full-time commitments. So 2015 and 2016 was definitely the year that I have, that I spent the least time on Food Finder, because I was trying to adjust to college as a freshman, get my sort of, feet wet a bit. But then when I was a sophomore year in college at this point, I was in the business school and at the School of Social Work. I had my curriculum that would directly help me inform and better serve the work that I had to do with Food Finder. I had resources that even when it was all said and done, I raised about $30,000 of grants and support for funding directly from the university for Food Finder. And when it was all said and done, we were expanding our database. We were starting to go into other states. And I think by the time I was starting my junior year of college, I still wasn't sure what I was going to do, whether it was, like a traditional for-profit, like consulting, or a business profession when I graduated. But no matter what, I was like, yeah, Food Finder is going to be a nationwide resource, come hell or high water. And it was just did my best.
What gave you that resolve at that point to say something like this now?
I think it was the same.
You got an education. You've got some great business experience now, based on what you've done. You got this nonprofit experience. You now got a degree. When you can have got a job and made money.
Yeah, I think
so what gives you this resolve? Because this is important to people. How does that happen?
It was really difficult. So I think resolve is a great word to describe it, because it was understood. It was understanding that Food Finder, we might have really been onto something of how we were getting all this tremendous learning every time, especially when it was, again, on the ground of, we connected Food Finder to, we were partnering with the Georgia State Board of Education and the, Georgia state government. We would have teachers and counselors. Whenever we showed Food Finder to them, their eyes would light up. So whenever we knew that this is really something that everyone should have access to across America, because again, hunger is everywhere. And we know that at this time,
like what I'm hearing you say, if I could summarize it a little bit, is it sounds like you saw how important this had become, this site had become to so many people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. How could you, it sort of became a moment of, how can I not do this, right?
Yeah, it was, I said, I really didn't have a choice, because now that I knew what was going on, the situations of, the people who we helped, the truly dire circumstances.
This all started, This all started with a guy watching 60 Minutes. That's what's amazing to me. So, we got to fast forward just a little bit here. So tell me the next stage in the funding, okay, that you got. And then I want to end with how all of a sudden this thing became sustainable.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry we're shortcutting that. I spent so much time on the early stages because a lot of entrepreneurs needed to learn those lessons that you learned as you moved along. So go ahead.
Yeah. So of course, for the funding, we were scaling up. We overhauled the platform, and we certainly had to move away from foodfinderga.org because now that we're in, we were expanding nationwide, that would be no longer suitable for our needs. We identified, and again, this is still, a lot of work to do it when it was all said and done.
Full-time employees at this point? You get out of college, who's the full-time employees?
Bold of you to assume that we had full-time employees.
So let's say who's full-time working on it?
Yeah, it was really me and just me. Throughout college, it was actually, again, the true MVP. My mother was helping with data sourcing.
I love it.
And again, Food Finder wouldn't be here without her. So true saint. But for the funding and the data side, because they're all sort of going along in tandem, we secured grants from the Arby's Foundation here in Atlanta that paid for the development of our mobile app in 2016. We got funding from a whole different host of sources. Again, still, for the first 5 years of Finder's life cycle, it was grants and donations. So pretty par for the course of any nonprofit, but no true sustainability model up to that point. When I graduated college in 2019, we received our first six-figure grant from the Walmart Foundation. So that actually helped us establish full-time payroll. I hired myself as CEO and my mother as COO. Again, and that was actually, again, for really never being able to repay the work that she did enough, without getting too deep into it. She had really never been able to get a full-time, her work situation was really fluid after giving up her path in the corporate career to take care of me as an infant. So it was really nice to be able to give her the first full-time salary she had in a while. And it was just still literally the least I could do. But now we had payroll, we had a full-time team, and then we're working towards sustainability.
Geez. So how much money did you raise by the time, just after you got out of college? How much in total was raised from inception?
Yeah, so from inception, first 5 years of Food Finder's existence, from the start of our website to exactly 5 years later when I graduated college, it was about $350,000 in funding.
Okay. So then, so here you are at Food Finder. You now have these bigger grants, like from Arby's and also from Walmart.
Yep.
And you expand, and then something happened that moved from give me money, I need donors, to you tripped into something. I think it was maybe you had a plan and you were more prescient than I would be. But what happened? How did you how did the sustainability move happen to you?
Yeah, and that's why I've never been more excited for the future of Food Finder's work, given how much progress we've made in that precise avenue of how we can actually generate our own income and our own revenue, as opposed to always having sort of the perpetual hand held out asking for money. We could actually create value, as any great business should. We could create value for the people, the other businesses we could serve, and sustain our own operations.
So what did you do?
That's what I'm talking about. So we realized, and I had a new hypothesis since about 2017, 2018 of, well, there are so many big entities in the fight against hunger that are trying to help the same people we are, that throw so many dollars at supplying food assistance in America, and we're all about the demand of driving traffic to that. What if we could license our database or share the food pantry data that we had to basically give them their own version of Food Finder that they could then refer their constituents and beneficiaries to help drive traffic to the food pantries that they already supply. So whether it was food banks, foundations, other corporate entities that donate a lot of food, that was our thing that we wanted to test, of actually maybe a product that we could sell.
So who'd you go? Did it work?
Food Lion Feeds. We worked with Food Lion, the major retailer on the East Coast, in August of 2019 as our first paying API or Food Finder API client that we could then license our database to. And we basically built them a mini version of our food pantry locator for them. And of course, I know we're at time, so I'll just give the biggest sort of takeaway from this is that last year in 2019, out of about a total income of about $250,000 that we had between grants and donations, about 20% of our income last year was from earned revenue with that Food Lion partnership. This year in 2020, when we've earned about $250,000 in total income, 2/3 of our total income for 2020 was generated revenue that we earned ourselves through sharing our database and working with other entities in the fight against hunger.
That is, I mean, there's very few, nonprofits. Now you see nonprofits that have become sustainable. So it's what's really interesting is how you looked at, as hard as it was to build that database, now everybody said, wow, we really need that database. And so it was value. So fantastic. That's really fantastic. So I know we're running long, but this last question I have to ask you, since you've dedicated basically your adult life to this, all right, and you're going forward. So what is your vision for Food Finder US going forward? What will it become?
It's a fantastic question. A few different things. First is that we will be the first ever national database of every food pantry in America. The same reason why even our database right now of about 46,000 food pantries nationwide across all 50 states is so valuable. No one's ever put this really needed data set. No one's ever put this information together under one roof before. So we're going to do that. We're going to knock out all 100% of food pantries in America. But secondly, I think even almost more importantly, we want to be a true one-stop shop solution for hungry families in America. So anywhere in America, any time of year, we can not only be an emergency tool for families who need help right now, who need food today or tonight or tomorrow. We want to even get closer when we want to start addressing the root causes of hunger. What can we do as our position now that we have more of a seat at the national table at hunger relief? What can we do to address the root causes of hunger so that not only we can treat it and be an emergency resource, how can we prevent hunger from even taking place in the first place? And I know even though the need has never been higher, given the COVID-19 pandemic, we want to move the needle. We want to make a meaningful and transformative difference in the fight against hunger.
Wow. Here you are, 16 years old. You watch 60 Minutes and it turns into, we want to move the needle with the fight against hunger. Okay. You're 22 years old. You're going to be 23 when?
April, just 4 months away.
Okay, well, wait. So you're 22 and a half years old, and here you are in the midst of this. My God, it's amazing what one man, one person, one child, in effect, at 16 can do to actually change the world. So I'm so excited. You helped a lot of entrepreneurs today, Jack. I can tell you that. These experiences play into anything that we're doing, even our commercial enterprises. And hopefully maybe there's some nonprofit people that'll hear this too, hopefully, and they'll say, if he can do it, I can do it. So I know you're just, it's inspirational to me because you see the needs of others and you took action, and we all need to do the same thing, and that's basically my takeaway. One person can make such a great difference, even without experience, but with great parents, but especially a great mother. Okay. So a weekly reminder to everybody is watch your cash. It goes out fast and comes in slow. Learn fast, decide fast, and go fast, just like Jack did. This is the last Paparelli Zoom chat for entrepreneurs in 2020. I thank you all for really an amazing year of gifted entrepreneurs. I thank each and every one of you, like Jack, who have shared their experience with other entrepreneurs, because it really did make us stronger. I continue to pray for you. I say that all the time. And if you want to experience this daily prayer for entrepreneurs, you could tune into Charlie Paparelli on TikTok. And I think you'll be surprised that I've been doing this for a while, a daily prayer. Thanks for attending. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. This is the end of the formal interview, and I'll turn it over to John Marshall, so you'll be able to ask Jack the questions that you have.
Great. Thank you very much, Troy. And thank you, Jack. Very, very inspirational. Jack, please, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself, please? Would you mind sharing your email address? There's a lot of folks that would like to reach out to you.
Yeah, of course. And I'll type it in the chat right here. And again, sorry for not being able to address any of the questions up to this point. My email is jack@foodfinder.us. So it's right there in the chat. And of course, even for the organizations that everyone asks us about, like Unitas and Gooder, we're familiar with all of them. So happy to address any questions and see how we can help.
Great. Thank you, Jack. And Andy Borgmann's got a question. Andy?
Yeah. Thanks, Jack, for sharing. It was great. And just, it's so inspiring to kind of see somebody so young kind of decide what they want to do and do it, and turn it into action. I got two questions for you. I was a executive of a food company on the for-profit side of kind of what you're doing. And my first question was, have you been able to help your food banks with the USDA's Farmers to Family program, which is about a $4.5 billion program? I got called to basically say, hey, we get $200 million. We can just figure out how to donate $200 million of food. Do you know of anybody? I didn't know of your website necessarily at the time, but it's like it would have been a great resource. Have you been able to do that? And if not, might be something you want to look into.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the short answer is that absolutely, we've been very top of mind. I've been even fortunate enough since about for the last 2 years, been working closely with the USDA itself, Secretary of Agriculture Perdue, Undersecretary Lips, and who's really especially the champion of the Farmers to Families program, working with them very closely. And of course, even though, as I'm sure you know, I'm preaching to the choir when I say that really everyone had to sort of learn on the fly when it came to the emergency response for food assistance during the pandemic. We did everything we could, and we're very top of mind, not only for referring our users to full-time food pantries who were already in operation before the pandemic, but also making sure we could refer them to school providers, summer meal providers, and the pop-up places that were giving out Farmers to Families food.
Right. What's your second question?
And my second question was that somebody came and contacted me in 2018 about you, and it wasn't a right time for me I wasn't paying attention well enough, I don't think. But I went back and reread the email that they sent to me about you from consulting. And it seemed like social impact was a big part of what you were struggling with in 2018. I'm now working with somebody that is also kind of in the social impact world. And I kind of wondered, what lessons have you learned since 2018 on social impact and how to basically prove social impact that you might want to pass along to somebody who's new into that world?
Yeah, that's another terrific question. And I think that the key is, again, really no silver bullet when it comes to that, when answering that question. But I think especially for sort of living and breathing it through Food Finder itself, if we can be sustainable and, are here for as many years as we want to be to come, then that's how we can help more people in the long run. So collaboration, the importance of that, not trying to see social impact as a zero-sum game, like your grant dollars take away from my grant dollars, or if it comes close to the social enterprise route, using sometimes technology or even just different ways of thinking to solve really long-standing problems. We could see that you could use Food Finder for any other, applicable social problem, that sometimes just a new solution or a new way of thinking can make possible massive strides that weren't possible before. So there's just a whole host of, the creativity, the innovation that is so often common in the for-profit landscape because of the profit motive. If we applied that to social impact and nonprofits, we could do some really cool things.
Great. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Larry, for your question. Andy. Larry, you're next. Larry, you can ask your question, please.
Yeah, Jack, I'm very impressed with what you are doing, and I'm glad that you collaborated with the food banks. And
Larry, you have to speak up, please.
It must be my computer.
No, we can hear you, Larry, but you're leaning back. Lean forward into the computer. I think it'll be better. Okay. Yeah. Sit up straight and talk loud. Come on now, Larry. I know you. All right.
I wanted to know what your relationship is
Right.
with Gooder. I'm glad that you have that. I'm very, very impressed with her. The biggest difference is that she is a for-profit business, picking food that was going to go to waste and getting it to people in need.
Yeah, absolutely. Very familiar with Gooder. I've even seen Jasmine pitch and present live in person, and she's fantastic. So we're always, fans of their work. Of course, as you mentioned, sort of the two main differences between us and Gooder is that, we're a nonprofit, they're a for-profit. But more specifically with their work is all about food rescue and food salvaging. So, they take the catering, the meals, the food items that would be wasted otherwise, and then make it available either at their own pop-up food distributions or at the other food provider agencies across the metro Atlanta area. So they solve a really important problem when it comes to salvaging the supply of food that would be wasted. Of course, again, sort of from our and how we can really complement them, and we don't see them as, conflicting at all. Is that we want to make sure that people know about the food that then they salvage and that they can then repurpose and redistribute. So we haven't formally partnered with them yet, but would love to in the future.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Larry, for that question. Thank you, Jack. Bradley, go ahead and ask your question. Good question.
Yes, Jack. I guess it's kind of two questions. What are some of the reoccurring things you're finding at the root of the problem in the fight against hunger? And then the second one is, does the hunger problem seem to be on the rise year in and kind of year out? Does hunger, since you started, seem to be on the rise? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you for the questions. To the first one, recurrent problems in terms of the root as to why hunger is so bad in America in the first place. I think is actually a great way to connect the two questions is the fact that even before the pandemic hit in like January of this year, when full employment, economy is killing it, there were still 37 million Americans who were food insecure across the country. So the fact that when we were at full employment and the economy was red hot and there were still that many families who are struggling with hunger, that's really not great. So that when it gets into why is the minimum wage still so low, especially here in Georgia? Why are it still not the trope of, you can think of, people, taking advantage of the system or, just getting a free ride. And that's not at all the case. You have families who are working 1, 2, even 3 jobs and still can't afford food for them and their families. So that gets a lot to the economic inequality that is on a much more macro scale of why, even during the pandemic, why the rich have gotten so much more wealthy. And even in the recovery of the pandemic, and when people have really been left out for dry, it's just they don't have what they need. And it's not any fault of their own. We just have to do more, especially from a government perspective, to give them a leg up. And in terms of the hunger problem, COVID-19 eradicated a decade's worth of progress in reducing food insecurity in America in a matter of months. So that's why even before the pandemic, we had 37 million food insecure Americans. Now we have more than 50 million food insecure Americans, including 18 million children. So about 1 in 4 children.
Did you say 50 or 60 million?
50.
Okay.
So a tremendous increase. Again, so many children now that still struggle with food insecurity, which is just unacceptable. So we have it is on the rise, and it will be a very long fight to even get back to pre-pandemic levels of food insecurity, unfortunately.
Great.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jack. Mary Hightower. Mary, please ask your question.
It was a real short one, and I think it was partially answered. I'm glad Bradley got to go first. Jack, you're right. Nonprofits are odd animals. They are very siloed. The question I had was, have you connected with Unite Us? They're a group of churches in the Atlanta area, but you've gone national, much larger than just Georgia.
Yeah, no, I think I've had one conversation with an individual from Unite Us, and I know that they're doing great work, especially from the, as you said, for the faith perspective, and of course for even Food Finder itself. We're definitely not the only referral service out there, and there are a lot of ones that have really followed in our footsteps, even since we got started. But we're again, I sound like a broken record at this point. We're all trying to help the same people. So how can I think that, and that is where I think the future of this sort of very growing, even, call it an industry, but the social service information referral landscape, I think that's where the future of it lies, is true collaboration. Even, what we do is not really even an established ecosystem enough to have best practices or, standards or anything like that. But I think that with the collaboration and with the data sharing, then we can all have better, more accurate, more useful information that we can then, of course, pass that on to the food insecure families that we want to help and connect to the assistance that's already being offered.
That's
John,
great. Thank you,
so
Jack.
much. John, thank you for your, thanks for taking care of this. You did a great job for us. And Jack, I just, we are over. This is 10 o'clock, but I have one last question for you that I want you to, so you can share with people. You know, I almost set this thing up like you're completely sustainable, but you're not. Okay. So if people want to, can you give us your pitch for donation, for donors? You know, so what's the quick pitch? Why do you need money to do what you're doing? What would happen if we gave you money here?
Of course. And I don't want to oversteer the boat, just as you said, because donations are still incredibly important to our ability to help people in Georgia and across America.
Right.
It's worth noting that and again, you just don't go straight to our website, foodfinder.us. If anything, if my story, if anything about our mission resonates with you, we would be honored if you gave to our cause. Every $10 that you donate to Food Finder goes directly to our digital awareness efforts to reach and connect even more food insecure families to assistance programs in their area. So every $10 that you contribute to our cause helps us benefit and serve 200 food insecure Americans across the country. So we face the same problem as the food pantries. If no one knows about us, then we can't have our intended impact. So if you want to help us and walk alongside us in our journey to make a meaningful difference in the fight against hunger, please consider donating, and we could not be more grateful for your support.
May I just make one comment before we leave, please, Charlie?
Hey, Yvonne, the floor's yours, baby. Go ahead.
Jack, I've done a lot of work with food insecurities and a lot of organizations and nonprofits and corporations. So I would like to talk to you to share what I have and to see if I can connect you to any of the corporations, organizations that I have worked with, that I've done a lot of work around this. So I just want to say thank you, because there are so many people who go to bed every night without food. Mm-hmm. And so this is big for me. And I was going to tell you about Walmart, but I'm glad you've already gotten to them, because they do a lot of support. They support a lot of food programs.
Yeah, thank you. Would love to keep the conversation going.
And thanks, Yvonne.
I'll send you an email.
Encourage each and every one of you, look, go to the site, foodfinder.us, and let's all make a donation. He's saying $10 helps 200 families. $10, just get started. So something means big impact. So let's do that. It is the Christmas season, so Merry Christmas to everybody. Thanks for attending. I will stay in touch with you so you'll know what will be happening in January. I love you all, and I thank you all for everything you've done. Jack, you're super impressive, and we really do love you, and we will be praying for you for your great success. You're making a big difference in our country. Amen and amen. So take care, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
All right. Take care, Jack.
Thank you, Jack.